Welcome back to the channel, friends. This is Sean with Living Peace Yoga. This is raw and unfiltered. So we're just going to go with the flow during this practice. Before we get started, though, if you are liking the content, yes, hit the subscribe button and please hit the thumbs up button so that we can continue to bring content your way. So I have a personal friend who I'm friends with on Facebook. And of course, I throw out when I have a new YouTube video on Facebook. And she has commented a couple of times, hey, I tried this one tonight, really enjoyed it. However, I'm still working on that balance. And then she wrote again another time that said, practice was great. I did this one. I got all the way through it, but I'm still working on balance. Well, friends, I am a yoga instructor, but I do not at all consider myself an expert in yoga. I'm working towards that, as we say in our yoga practice. However, there are still times that I falter with balance. Another friend of mine who is near and dear to my heart, she calls herself a word nerd because she likes to look up the definition of words and see how the definition correlates with the discussion or what you're talking about, or putting it into context of the study that she is teaching. She's a Bible study teacher. So, taking her words of being a word nerd, I went ahead and I looked up the word balance. And the official definition is an even distribution of weight, enabling someone or something to remain upright and steady. So we're going to work on that today. We're going to work on some balancing poses, and I'm going to give you some tips and tricks to be able to get into those poses and stay into those poses. I may falter too during this time, but we allow ourselves grace as we move toward, in our practice, developing those skills, which then help us further our yoga practice. What you will need for today's practice is at least a block, maybe two, because we will be using these as modifications in maybe one or two of these poses. And then also a bolster, blanket, pillow of any sort for our Shavasana at the end, of course. So if you would, roll out your mat, get into something comfy because you may falter a little bit, and that's okay. And we're going to jump in and do some yoga. So friends, back to balance. Balance poses help to poise, coordination, and focus. So that's what balancing in yoga is about. They require you to draw in the core muscles. You will often hear us yogis say, knit the ribs together, meaning drawing in the abdomen. I've heard it, and I've even said it, that you feel like there's a string on the inside of your belly button and it's being pulled towards your spine or the back. With all of that being said, AKA suck it in. We just try to say it a little kinder in our yoga terms. But no, knitting in those ribs and pulling the abdomen in and keeping it nice and tight and firm through these poses is what helps you keep the pose and maintain the pose. So drawing in those core muscles allows our bodies to awaken so that we have increased control over the entire physical body. So really, and that's why it takes so much concentration and focus for a balance pose, because we're knitting in these ribs, we're drawing our shoulders down and back, we're drawing the skull up towards the ceiling. There's kind of all these phases of what it takes to hold and maintain a balancing pose. But it also reminds me of our faith walk and in our Christ walk, or our walk along with Christ. The more I obtain balance in my pose, in my mind, it's the more I'm surrendering to Him. And the more I surrender to Him, the more He gives back. And the more I get back, the more I'm able to have that balance in a pose. And I feel like that's why sometimes we're off, right? I don't get them perfect every time. Now, I may get a balancing pose perfect. I get my leg high in the air. It just looks beautiful. My ribs are knit nicely together, and I do great. And then another night, I can't hold my pose to save my life. Now, there are possible physical reasons that happens. Degenerative neck disease, some balance issues in the ears, some equilibrium, tinnitus, things like that. But outside of those things that could cause your balance to be off, sometimes it's just because you're off or I'm off. And I can usually tell when I'm having an off day because my balance will not be what it usually is. So practicing that reliance on God helps us to surrender more. Just like the pose, the more you grasp it, moving toward His place of contentment for you. This is why us yogis that practice yoga, but then also walk in a Christian faith-based life, feel that the two go hand in hand. And they really do go together and they complement each other so well. And that's why I love doing it. So we're going to work on a couple of poses. So we're going to work on some balance. But I'm also going to give you some modifications to help in times of need or times of trouble. And then I'm also going to give you some props to use or that you can use to get yourself working towards becoming the pose in that balance. And then I'll also show you the full pose with no modification so that you know what to look forward to in your forward practice. So first off though, I'd like to run through a couple of vinyasa flows just to get us warmed up a little bit so that we can work towards these balancing poses. Okay? So with that, we will get on to all fours. Curl those toes, come back into a downward facing dog, pedaling out those feet, creating space in those hamstrings as we're going to need these legs for some of these balancing poses. That's why this particular video is going to be raw and unfiltered because we're just going to be talking about poses. This isn't a formal practice per se, but you will definitely get some heat and definitely a nice workout while we're practicing these. So press those hips back, look to the top of the mat. We're going to walk, hop, skip, jump, however you'd like to get to the top. Forward, fold it out. Good, allowing that upper body just to fold over the lower body. Awesome, we're going to take a big deep breath in, standing up, hands up at the top. Exhale, forward, fold it out. Inhale, we're going to halfway lift. Exhale, forward, fold it out. Hands to the mat. We're going to extend our feet back in a plank pose. Coming down into that chaturanga push-up and up dog. And then curl those toes back to downward facing dog. Good. Pedal out one more time here, just to create space. Good. We're going to look to the top of the mat. We're going to walk, hop, skip, jump, forward, fold it out. Good. Big deep breath in. Arms up overhead as we stand. Exhale, forward, fold it out. Inhale, halfway lift. Exhale, forward, fold it out. We're going to extend our feet back to plank. Coming through that chaturanga and up dog. And then we're going to come back to downward facing dog. Good. Come to your mat in any comfortable position or pose. So friends, we're going to start with tree pose. But what I would first like to just mention is when I started yoga a few years ago, I had no balance. I had no rhythm. I had none of that. And it was frustrating, and it was a challenge to move towards that in my practice. But with continued practice, I eventually got there. But I want to share with you one tip, or the first tip, that I did to help advance myself in my practice. And it began with brushing my teeth. So, when we are in balancing poses, since we are starting with tree, we can go ahead and stand just somewhere in the middle of the mat. When I would brush my teeth, I would think about there are 4 points on your foot that I want you to be mindful of. So I'm going to sit back down so that I can show you these 4 points. You can stay standing. But what I would do is I would rock back and forth as I brushed my teeth, and I would think about those 4 points as I'm brushing. But meanwhile, standing on one leg, I would bring the other leg up to practice just standing on one leg. And then I would move to the other and think about those 4 points. So the focus of tree pose is actually the sole of the foot. And people don't realize that. They think, well, I'm standing up straight. How can the sole of my foot be the focus? But it is. And the reason it is, see if I can get my foot up here high enough for you. There are 4 points on the foot that I want you to be mindful of. So the ball of the foot, right under the big toe, just to the left of that, kind of near the 4th toe over, just below that. So these 2 points, and then the 2 points on the heel. So right around that heel bone. Both feet have that sensation when you are in a standing or a balancing pose. So for example, we're going to place the right foot on the mat, and you're going to concentrate on just those 4 points of the foot balancing to the mat or touching the mat. Keeping that ankle nice and steady, and notice how straight that leg is. My hip points are pointed towards the wall in front of me or just straight ahead. And then just focusing on those 4 spots or 4 points on the foot. And eventually, you have a nice balancing pose. Okay, and then you can try it on the other side as well. So that's the focus of tree. Also, the foot with the inner thigh press. So a full expression of tree is bringing let's say the right foot all the way up to the inner left thigh. And then what I'm doing here is I'm pressing the right foot into the left thigh and then also pressing that left thigh into the right foot. So what I'm doing is I'm creating this energy that's coming to the center of my body. And then I'm knitting in my ribs. So I get this balance by this long line of energy here, knitting in these ribs. See, raw and unfiltered, so it's not like I can go back and fix that one. So pressing the foot and the inner thigh together, keeping the left leg nice and straight, knitting in those ribs, or pulling that belly button towards the spine. Okay? Easy as pie, right? Okay, we don't have to try the full expression though. There are a couple of modifications we can do. If you have a chair or a table top or a wall that is next to you, you can certainly use that as a prop. A block is going to be difficult in this pose because it's too short, even for me, and I'm short. Okay, so if you need something to hang on to, feel free to grab whatever's next to you, a chair. I happen to have a fireplace, whatever works for you. So the start of tree pose is to extend the left leg nice and long. We're going to knit those ribs in towards the abdomen or towards the back. And then we're going to take the right heel and we're going to place it on the left ankle. So this is the least expressive tree pose, and it's a perfect tree pose. Your hands can go anywhere they like. So hands at heart center, hands at the sides, hands up in the air, whatever works for you. But I am concentrating or focusing, you heard me say that before, on those 4 points of the left foot. So those 4 points are what's holding all of this one long line of energy. Make sense? And then if you want to move deeper, but let's say you're not quite ready for the full expression, you can just move that foot up to the calf so that you're, moving forward in your practice, but you're not quite all the way to the full expression of tree, and that's okay too. This is a perfect tree as well. You're moving forward in that practice. And then if you would like, full expression is bringing the right foot all the way up to the inner left thigh, pressing those together, knitting in the ribs, dropping the shoulders down and back, and really rooting down into those 4 points of the left foot. And there you go. There's tree. And then you can do whatever you like with those hands once you get a little more comfortable in that pose. Okay? So that's tree pose. Modifications would be depth of the pose. So maybe how long you're holding it or how deep you're going into the pose, which is what I just talked about, maybe bringing the right foot closer to the mat. That would be helpful. And then we talked about props, a wall, a chair, a fireplace, anything that is helpful to get you into that pose or to help you build into that pose. Okay, next we're going to do dancer. This is probably one of the most difficult balancing poses in yoga that I have found so far. It took me a long time to get this pose, so do not feel bad if you can't do it either the first time or the second time or the third time. I fell a lot getting into this pose, okay? So I'm going to turn towards the back of my mat. You can turn towards the front if you like, but this is going to be the best way that you can see me get into the pose. Okay, so both feet together, my two big toes are touching, and I'm going to place my hand out, my left hand out, with my wrist bent as if I'm carrying a waiter's tray, okay? Then I'm going to lift up. We're going to now place our weight into the right leg, okay? Making that leg nice and straight and stiff. We're going to knit those ribs in so that when we come up off that left leg, the right leg is supporting that long line of energy or the weight that we've created there. So we're going to bring up the left foot. We're going to grab the inner edge, or we're going to place the inner edge of the left foot into that hand that we have tilted out for it to rest on. We're going to bend at the knee. Now this is the least expressive dancer pose, and this is okay. If this is where you're started, this is fine. However, to move deeper into the pose, place your right hand up. We're going to tip forward, both hip points pointed towards the wall in front of you. We're going to tip forward, bending at those hips, raising the left foot at the same time. Now, you may feel comfortable right here. This may be your edge, and that's okay. This may be where you say, okay, if I go anymore, I'm going to tip over. And that's fine. Stay here, and you can work towards the full expression later. But full expression would be bent, more so in half, lifting that left foot up, pressing the left foot into the left hand. That creates your balance as well. I did that on purpose so that I could show you that. So bending at the hips, right arm coming down with the hips and pressing that left leg up at the same time, rooting into the 4 points of the right foot, keeping the right leg nice and straight, and then pressing that left foot into the left hand for full expression. Okay? And then however long you hold the pose is up to you or up to your instructor or the class that you're in. Sometimes you might hold it longer, sometimes you might hold it less. So that would be a modification, but the start of dancer is here. Okay? Perfect. That was a beautiful dancer. Even if you fell 15 times while I went through it with you, that was a beautiful dancer. Because you know what? You're here. You're giving yourself self-care. You're teaching yourself to move forward in your yoga practice. And that, my friend, is awesome. Okay. Last one we're going to do today, and that is Warrior 3. So again, the focus is to knit those ribs together. You want the 4 points of that planted foot. So see, any balancing pose is always going to entail the 4 points of that planted foot. And then that leg being nice and straight and stiff, creating that long line of energy, and then knitting in the ribs, of course. And then keeping the hips square to the mat. And you'll know what I mean because we tip forward in Warrior 3 as well, similar to how we did in the previous pose dancer, okay? Modifications, you can use a wall or a chair. You can, the elevation of that back foot, you can elevate it to whatever level feels comfortable. You don't have to kick it all the way up. I am going to show you the full expression, but it doesn't mean you have to get there, and that's okay. I was not there when I first started. It took me a long time to get these balancing poses. These are the hardest poses in yoga in general. So don't beat yourself up. Give yourself grace. Give yourself mercy, and make it fun. I mean, that's just what I had to do. There were times I would just laugh at myself because it was the 5th time I had fallen in a practice, and I just had to laugh. It's frustrating, but I had to laugh. So laugh at yourself. Have fun with it. Okay, and I think we have finally come to the end. So, Warrior 3. So I'm going to stand in the middle of my mat, body facing the top of the mat. We have both legs nice and straight, stiff, feeling those 4 points, and it's a mental issue, it's a focus issue, it's a concentrate issue, to think about both feet and the 4 points aligning to the mat. Another way to practice that, which I just thought of, place all 4 points on the mat and then lift your toes. I'm not moving at all. So when you're at the grocery store and you're standing in line, practice standing on both feet with your toes up. Nobody knows because you have your shoes on. So there are things you can do to work, towards your practice, and nobody knows it. Okay? So I'm going to stand with both feet pointed towards the front of the mat, as well as my hips. I'm going to drop those shoulders down and back. I'm going to knit those ribs together. And we're going to bend into a warrior 3. I'm going to raise my right leg and stand on the left leg just so you can see the variations we're going to do. Now with warrior 3, your hands can be wherever the instructor decides they need to be. Sometimes, we might raise them up and then bend forward with them up. We can do hands at prayer center. We can do mountain arms. So there's lots of things we can do with it. For today's purpose, though, I'm going to have our hands out in front so you can see that long line of energy from the tips of my fingers all the way down to the tips of my right toes, since my right leg will be extended. Okay? All right, so we're going to stop. We're going to start. So big, deep breath in, hands up overhead. I'm going to take a small step forward with my left foot, feeling where those 4 points have landed. My hips are pointed in the direction they should be, so no turning of the hips. We're going to place those hands up. We're going to bend at the hips, and at the same time, pull that right leg up off the mat, extending it out straight behind. And then when you feel comfortable, I usually will get to my edge, and then I try to go a little deeper, really straightening up that left leg, straightening out those arms, feeling that long line of energy. Good. Now this is a pose, warrior 3, where a block would come in handy, because you might be able to get the legs up, but then maybe it's hard to coordinate the arms with the legs, which is fine. Sometimes you need to learn the legs before you learn the arms. It's like a baby. You got to learn to crawl before you can walk, right? So sometimes having that block there is helpful because you might be able to get that back leg up, but you don't really have anything to do with the arms. So you just use the block as a gentle reminder, a gentle, subtle modification as you get those legs where you want them. Okay? So, my friends, that is balance in a nutshell. I hope this video was helpful for you. I know that when I first started yoga, I did yoga online. I did go to a few live classes, and I never really had anyone explain to me the core of yoga and how you get into these poses better and how you stay longer and all of those things. So hopefully this tutorial was helpful. Hopefully you can utilize the tips and tricks. If you are still working on just general balance, I promise you, stand on one foot, hold the other foot up while you're brushing your teeth, and that helps tremendously. So go ahead, hit that subscribe button, hit the thumbs up if you enjoyed today's content. I'll throw out some additional tutorials as we go along and as I get requests for them. So if there's something you would like a tutorial on, please hit the comments below and let me know, and I'm happy to bring out that content so that helps you in your practice. But otherwise, I hope you find some peace off the mat today as you did on, and I will see you on your mat again next time.